We'll start with LR428, introduced by Senator Dubas to examine issues related to beekeeping and honey production and marketing.
Name's Keith Nielson, K-E-I-T-H-N-I-E-L-S-O-N. I would like to thank the committee, Committee Chairman Senator Carlson, Vice Chair Senator Dubas, and the rest of the Natural Resources Committee for allowing us to have this hearing. To me, honey is a hobby, but it's moving to be a business. And most of my marketing is done through farmers markets. And we try to produce a very pure product for the consumer. And what I see out in the stores is honeys that are coming into the state that may be altered. They contain high fructose corn syrup. Part of this comes, like Senator Dubas said earlier, it's being transshipped. It's coming from China, goes to India, goes to Argentina, Brazil, and into the United States where packers pack it. It is not fair to our industry to have a product labeled as honey that is not pure honey. High fructose corn syrup should not be added to our product. And with that, visiting with Senator Dubas, we do not have any standards on honey in the state of Nebraska. There's none in any of the rules and regulations in the Department of Ag. And that's why we come before this group, is to ask you to adopt the Codex standards for honey. It's an international standard. The United States voted not to adopt it. The standards are very specific as to what classifies it as honey. And there are very few exceptions in that rule because of certain plant species that if they're labeled according to that species that produces the nectar that goes into that honey, it will meet those standards. We think it's only right that we have a course of action that we can take as a honey producer for somebody that brings honey into our state that is altered. And they misrepresent our industry. And we think it's only fair that we have an avenue to take legal action. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Questions of the committee? Senator Shields.
Thank you. Keith, welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Keith, they have
Yes.
some questions for you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. Keith, thank you for coming in. I understand exactly what you're saying and things like that. What, I mean, are you at all concerned about if the law's in place that somebody could accuse you of your honey being adulterated and take you through a process that, you know, in other words, retaliatory or anything like that? Because I'm sure at only selling 600 pounds of honey a year, you probably can't afford it, you know, spending it on lawyers and attorneys to defend what you're doing.
I can understand your concern, Senator Schultz. No, I'm not concerned about it because my product is pure honey.
But you have to prove that it's not, if someone would come against you, wouldn't you? If we would set up the law as you asked, wouldn't that be the case?
Yeah, that would be the case. They could come after me, but in the testing process of that honey, I'm sure that I would win because my product is going to be pure, unadulterated honey.
And I'm not disputing that at all. I just wonder about the process of what it would take to prove that your honey is pure. That's a concern that I have because most honey producers, as I understand it, aren't big business, and we want to make sure we don't put something into place that could have an adverse effect on what you're doing as well. I understand. I fully agree with what you're saying. I just want to make sure that in trying to find a solution, that we don't put you folks in the crosshairs yourselves.
And we have a very good university that's able to do the testing on those honeys, and the cost of those services are minimal compared to the damage that it does to our industry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Senator Price.
Yes, thank you again for coming out and testifying. I have a couple perhaps questions here. When you made your testimony, you stated that walking down the aisle, you see honeys that may be altered. You know, so the question comes, how would one, you can put a stamp on anything that says it's pure. And as Senator Shields was saying, pretty much that alludes to, I just went ahead and put a label on it. How can you visually inspect a honey and make a determination this is pure and this isn't pure from a jar walking by? So if you're talking about inspection and enforcement.
Honestly, you can't by a visual inspection. It would have to be brought before, you know, with our Beekeepers Association, where if we suspect that those honeys are being tainted, we could actually take those honeys to a lab like the University of Nebraska, have those tested. Then we would have grounds to take action on the adulterated honey that's in the state.
Okay, so that leads me to my next part. Is there value in researching that a person or an enterprise become a certified producer of pure honey? So instead of saying I'm looking at the end product and have to wait for it to be tested, I go to the source and say this person would lose their certification, their ability to put on it, I rate's only pure honey. Therefore, there's a closer penalty for doing otherwise.
That's a thought. I mean, that's an issue that I had not thought of. In other words, you're saying it's very similar to the pesticide applicators being certified to apply certain chemicals?
Right.
And there are chemicals that are used by producers out here that are only being used as they are labeled. And yeah, I guess we could probably go through a certification process to do those.
Just a question, as it applies to you mentioned a codex. Was it? I didn't get to know. I don't have right in front of me, but the process by which things are graded. What is that again?
It's the International Codex for a Honey Standard.
Codex?
Codex, C-O-D-E-X.
Okay, I got that part right then. Great. Well, that's why I was looking at it. If you balance against that, if that's what you're going to use as your ruler. So, okay, thank you very much, sir.
Any other questions?
I probably have a question. I'm going to make a statement here. If you're kind of new at this process, we'll simply direct questions at the one that is testifying. In your turn, you can refer back to something that was asked and clarify a thought if you'd like to do that. Any other questions? As you started to talk about, I pick up my bottle of water here and I'm looking for the ingredients, which there shouldn't be any. So on pure honey on the shelf, what's on the label?
Well, it would be pure honey.
Wouldn't be anything else, would it?
Would be nothing else. There are other products out there that I'm sure Warren's going to talk about later. If it is a creamed honey, there is a very fine crystallized sugar, and it's only a very small part of that, and that would be on the label. Infused honeys, where you add cinnamon flavors, lavenders, things like that, it would be labeled as an infused honey, which means that you've added a scent to it.
So you're not against that as long as it's labeled properly?
That's correct.
Can you go to do you think you can go to a supermarket shelf and pick out something that doesn't have anything on the label other than pure honey and say that there's something else in here? Can you identify that readily?
Readily, no, I cannot, Senator, but there are certain packers that are suspect of altering honeys for shipment to different parts of the United States, and it would, with the cooperation of other beekeepers associations, we visit amongst each other along with the American Bee Federation to where we can identify where these products are coming from.
Now, I don't know that I would think it applies to honey, but I think of honey as a product that is used widely, and if you end up with a narrow definition, which pure honey is pure honey, and you may have answered this with your response to the last one, you're not trying to outlaw any other kind of product, you just want it labeled truthfully.
That's correct, Senator.
But if there's not very much honey in the product, do you want honey in the name?
We're not attacking the packaging of other products at this point. Our point here is the liquid honeys is what I would like to see, Senator.
So you don't have any problem with Bitto honey?
No, I enjoy the product as much as Senator Dubas does, but yeah, it is misleading.
Well, I don't know that it's misleading. It's a bit of honey.
Just a wee bit, huh?
It's a marketing gimmick, Senator.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
I would also like to invite the committee over to the Beekeepers Association booth so that you can see what real honeys are. And we do have it's a unique product this year with Nebraska State Fair moving to Grand Island. We will have a hard-packed honey ice cream that actually uses real honey in it in the process, and there's also some honey taffies there as well that was developed by the University of Nebraska Food Science Department working with the Nebraska Beekeepers Association. So I want to thank you for your time, Senators.
You may not be done yet. Senator Shields.
Thank you. Keith, thanks for putting up with me here. You said that there's other larger packers that will collect honey and put it together and then bottle it out. Does anybody from Nebraska sell to those larger packers? No?
Yes, there are. In the state of Nebraska, about 70% of our honey is exported out of the state to packers. Sioux Bee Honey is one. They have been a very reliable company. It originated with a bunch of growers at Broken Bow, Nebraska and areas, and they wanted to see a true product out there on the market. As to my knowledge, as editor of the Nebraska Beekeepers Association, I can think of only 3 people in the state of Nebraska that utilize commercial kitchens that can sell retail. And one of those people is in the room today, and I'm sure he will be testifying. And I know there's one in Omaha and one in Salmo, Nebraska.
And the reason I asked the question is that if by chance a Nebraska producer would sell to one of these packers, and then there would be a question as to whether or not they were actually packaging the honey there, how far down the line does that go? Does that come back to the person that provided them, or does that come to the company? Because you'd have to find out who's doing the adulterating.
I really think it should lie on the company unless they can prove it back that it came from the producer, but most producers are not going to alter their product going to a packer.
Right.
And most packers do a test on the honeys. Most reputable packers will do a test on the honey before it's packaged. Right. And that's what we're looking at here, Senator, is the reputation of the honey industry in the state of Nebraska.
Right. I don't get me wrong, I'm a cattleman, so I know exactly what you're talking about when you start talking about your brand and what you're doing. But on the other side of that, we have to make sure that we don't put you guys in the crosshairs and provide an opportunity for somebody to come back and use your tool against yourselves. And that's what I'm thinking about. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I think the Codex standard will suffice in that. Like Senator Dubas said earlier, Florida led the nation on this. Currently, I think there are 22 states on board that are in the process of adopting a honey standard. New York has adopted one along with Utah as well. And yes, this is a grassroots movement. We're not getting the support out of the Food and Drug Administration like we should. And beekeepers across the nation are uniting on this forefront to give you what's on the label and what you're buying.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.